Hello, everyone.
Hello, surprise, surprise.
Your food safety duo, we're together today. So only the one screen.
Yes, which we're excited about. We're always excited about the show. We're
We
excited
are.
about Real Talk Food Safety because it brings us together, right? But we're super excited this week because we're together.
Yeah, we're actually in person. And if any of you know, like T and I didn't actually meet in person until June.
Yes.
We have been connecting like online and first virtual because of COVID for so long that it's always a pleasure. It's so
Yes, it
much
is.
fun when we're together.
It really is. It really is. You should hear the nerdy conversations that happen. Because that's what we're always talking about. We're always talking about technical leadership. How do we make it better? How do we help develop other people? How do we use this thing called coaching, right? To really help grow people because we know that coaching is a powerful tool.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And we talk about this a lot, but it's the truth, right? We've all had training and education, but
Mhm.
we do that and we have the best intentions of following through and doing it tomorrow. And then, a week later, all of a sudden, we fall off the wagon. And it's not because we don't see the value, it's because we get distracted by the normal things we're doing. And so coaching helps fill in that space so you can really get the success that you want.
Absolutely. So we want to know, where are you listening from? Where are you? We are in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Yeah.
So I'm from Tennessee, for people that know. I'm from Knoxville, so I'm not that far from home. And so where are you guys listening in from?
Yeah, give us a shout out. We'd love to know if you're here with us live or even on the replay. So, I'm thrilled to be down here in Tennessee because it's about, I think, 10 degrees, 15 degrees colder up in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a treat.
Right.
I got to wear short sleeves on my walk this morning.
Yeah, in Tennessee, we're definitely in fall weather.
It's beautiful.
It's very beautiful. When Minneapolis area, you guys are probably going to winter.
Not quite. I mean, it's still fall, but it's definitely cooler.
Right. I like to pick on the Minneapolis people. Because it gets cold up there. So I always laugh because a couple of years ago, some of my friends that live in or outside of Minneapolis, they had a snowstorm in like April, and there was like snowing, and I'm like,
that's normal.
That's normal. That's normal.
No surprise.
So we're enjoying Tennessee. We want to hear where you're listening from. And then we want your feedback. We want your perspective. We want your questions. So please add them to the chat as we're having this conversation around emotional intelligence.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Because, if you read the descriptor, it was kind of like, what's the magic that helps you get to the next level or helps you be a better leader? Because when we're in food safety, whether we have direct reports or whether we don't, or whether we have indirect reports or we're part of teams, we are always influencing.
Right.
Yeah. So for us to be a better leader and step into that and have more success and to connect better with people when it comes from culture or engagement, those things all stem from emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. We talk about it all the time because we're so technical and our backgrounds are technical. We're used to going to the science or what does the data say? And in reality, without this emotional intelligence piece to it, we struggle as leaders. We struggle to motivate, inspire, influence. And then a little bit about what we're talking about today. We struggle to get to that next level because we are relying so much on data and really rational persuasion.
We are. So we're going to talk all about that. So Sarah, we're so glad that you could join us, of course, from Wisconsin. Go Badgers! So glad to have you here. We'd love to hear your experience around emotional intelligence and what comes up for you at work, and join in.
Absolutely. And we do like to say, a lot of people have been watching our show. We've been doing it since the beginning of this year. But if you don't know us, we are the Food Safety Duo. I'm Tia. This is Jill. And we are your go-to resource for technical leadership development. We really focus on developing those technical experts into technical leaders using coaching-based programs.
Yeah.
that's designed specifically for you, for technical experts, right? Where we meet you where you are, because we know what it takes. We've been in your roles. We've been there. We've been there trying to motivate an organization to prioritize food safety. And we made the mistakes, and we really have learned from it. And we've built these programs specifically for you.
We did. And, on top of that, we understand that when you are in a technical role, like the same leadership principles apply, but the way they work are very different when we come from a technical perspective.
Yes.
And the way that we interact with other teams. And so that's really part of what differentiates what we do and how we support people like you. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So welcome.
Let's dive in, because today the information we're going to talk about is emotional intelligence. It gets so much press, right? We see it in articles, we see it in social media, we hear it like everywhere. It's a buzzword. So what does it actually mean, and how do we actually build it?
Right, exactly. And really, to get to that next level, emotional intelligence really is a key factor. And, a lot of it is because anyone can find the data, right? Like we have the data, we have this technical background. A lot of us have a technical background, but it's more on like, if we can't relate to other people, if we can't get our message across and inspire other people, then we'll find that we're sitting in the same space. So emotional intelligence, it really is the key to get to the next level.
It is. And, to clarify, it's different than I'm a nice person or I seem to be personable with people. Those might be elements, but it's about being much more intentional on how we understand ourselves and how we're perceiving others.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I think a lot of people kind of go into it on like, oh, well, I can make friends easily, and I get along with everyone on the team, but they still struggle with getting their work done and leading a group. But it's because they're really missing this emotional intelligence piece, where it's like, yes, everyone in the room loves you as a person and considers you to be a friend. They're just not willing to follow you.
Yeah. And, I think to preface that, it's not either you have it or you don't. It's it's a scale, and it's like any continuous improvement project we do, right? Like, hey, we start somewhere, and then where are the areas we want to build, and how do we practice that? How do we like incrementally improve in emotional intelligence?
Right.
So,
exactly.
And I used to think that I was pretty emotional intelligence savvy, but of course, the more I learn, the more I know I don't know. The more I don't know, the more I don't know I know. What is that one? Right. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know. That's what it is.
Right.
And so that really, helped me go, wow, there are definitely areas that I want to explore more, because I need to get out of my team's way. I need to help them really shine and do the work that they can do. And for me to be able to do that is really be stepping into this and leaning into emotional intelligence more.
Right, exactly. I would say I've always had a strong emotional intelligence, but as I've gotten, really older, as I kind of grew up into adulthood, but also as I've gone into corporate America, I really had to lean into pieces of emotional intelligence on like when to really lean into it, and how do I really build those relationships with people from an empathy standpoint, right? And so even though I had it, like you said, it's a scale. It's like, how do I develop it over time to get even stronger? And then as a leader, how am I helping other people develop that?
Oh, that's another good one.
And that's what I had to lean into.
Very good. Yeah. And, I think with that, because we hear it so often, it's almost like a lip service. Like, oh yeah, EQ.
Yeah.
But I think to me, it's almost like when you're focused on your to-do list, but you forget that like there's the other priorities.
Yeah.
With EQ, it's if we're not focused on the bigger picture of it, we kind of get into the day-to-day of how we operate. And so we sometimes have to take that step back or have that pause so that we can really go, okay, what am I sensing here?
Right.
What am I not noticing here?
Right. So, otherwise, you can really just run off with it. Like your to-do list. You can just go down the to-do list and realize, oh, I haven't worked on my priorities at all. Just like what you're saying around emotional intelligence. You can be making decisions and realize, wow, I really haven't connected with my EQ side. to make the best decision possible. And so now people are mad at my decisions, or they didn't feel valued, or they don't feel a part of the solution because you didn't include them. You didn't pause, right? From what you're going through and your reaction to it. And so you end up with a situation that you might have to backtrack, or you might have to do some of that emotional intelligence stuff at the end, when if you had just did it in the beginning, it would have been a better outcome and you would be seen as a better leader. Right?
Yeah. You know, and we talk a lot about, like, in food safety and food safety culture, how do we have new conversations?
Mhm.
And, you know, I think when we talk about how does emotional intelligence show up, I can
Yeah.
definitely relate to, like, not reading the room.
Yes.
I remember one of the first interactions that I was invited to with our executive team.
Yeah.
And of course, I was very data driven. And I thought it was the best presentation to be able to show what we needed and where we were lacking. You know, and to be quite honest, I think some of the executives are really good at, like, poker face.
Right.
And
yeah.
so maybe it's not all me, but I wasn't sensing probably as well as I should have, because the outcome certainly didn't go where I was hoping it would go.
Mhm.
And I think, gosh, if I would have been able to better connect with that group and understand where they were at, how could I have had different results from
Yeah.
that interaction?
Yeah. Yeah. And reading the room is huge. And
Mhm.
some of it is like, I'm in the room, I need to pay attention to what's happening around. But sort of like to your point on doing the presentation, if you had had the conversations beforehand on, like, okay, Jill's going to be in the room. What does Jill like to hear? How does she typically respond if she doesn't like hearing what I'm saying? You know, like, having those conversations with people that know the people in the room will also help you be able to read that room. And sometimes it shows up in the sense of, I really didn't prep in that way.
No, I was
Right.
focused on, like, I felt confident in the material I was presenting and sharing. And, you know, people had helped me put that together. It wasn't just a, you know, one woman show.
Right. Yeah.
But without having that other element to be able to understand other people better, and for me to even be able to sit with that and distinguish from, you know, I'm sure I had butterflies, you know, from some
Yeah.
of that, to be able to separate that, to sense what other people were feeling as well.
Yeah. You know, I mentioned that because something very similar in a presentation format. I remember I was an intern and I didn't really understand the culture of the company. And the way that I gave a presentation, it was almost like they really liked for you to use I. Like, I did this, I did, because to them in that culture, it was like, okay, I don't know if it was like an ownership thing, or, you know, obviously it wasn't my personality. I didn't end up working there. So, but it's something that always stood with me, because I remember after I gave like a mock presentation, right, a practice, I had someone come up to me and was like, you have to drop the we. Like, you have to say I, because that's a part of the culture. And I'm like, well, it wasn't just, I'm literally an intern. There's no way I can do all of this stuff by myself, right? So of course it was a we. And they were like, that's just not the way that we talk about it in this way. You have to say I. And then at the end you say thank you to these people for helping you. But that was something similar to you. Like, I wasn't able to really read the room. I didn't do my research even in that emotional intelligence side to make sure I was prepared for the people in the room.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And it's about how do we really engage with people and understand people? Because, right, we're like the onions. There's so many layers. What we first say, it's like 5 whys. There's always more. There's another thing. So
yes. You know, another way that low emotional intelligence shows up is when something seems off, but you don't respond to it. So you're having a conversation and you feel that person's energy is just off, or maybe they're not as talkative as they were in the past, or you know, they're listening to you, but they're giving no feedback. And you realize that something's off right now, but you continue and you don't respond. You don't ask the questions. That's low emotional intelligence showing up.
It is. And it's interesting because it's like part of the equation is there, like awesome that you notice something was off. That awareness is a really huge part. So that's always a kudos. But then that next part is part of emotional intelligence. Like, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
How do I lean into that? Because that's going the next step of having connection with people and demonstrating a level of emotional intelligence.
Right, exactly. And it doesn't mean that you have to respond at the moment, right? Like if something's off, this person might be a little upset about something and maybe they don't want to talk about it, right? And then if you never bring it up again, right, even though you need to interact with this person, or maybe even as a leader, right, it's your team member, whether you're a direct team member or someone on your project team, if you're indirectly, leading, that really you just need to take some time and respond to that and say, hey, I noticed something was off. What's going on? Is there something I can help you with? Is there a barrier that I can help remove? Or sometimes people just need a vent, right?
Yeah.
And you see that as leaders where people want to vent to you about things going on. And a lot of times it's because something is off. Something is off. And as a leader, if you don't respond to that, that could be seen as someone that doesn't have emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And really, it's about seeing people. Right? Because we all want to be seen. And, even if it's something that we're like, oh, I don't know if I want to share this, or I'm trying to hold it together. But even when we see that with someone, that acknowledgement, right, that gets to our core to be like, you see me.
Yes.
And that is a really big part of being a leader, that you see people.
Yes. That's such a, I kind of want to just stop and think about that for a little bit, because that I would say, and obviously this is us on Real Talk, right? We're having real talk, but it's this piece. I would say this is one of the top things as a leader, is that your team must feel like you see them, and they must feel like you, as a leader, you know who I am. You know how I like to work. You know the things that I like working on. You know the things that I'm working on. Doesn't really give me any
joy,
right? If it doesn't mean that you still might have to do it, but as a leader, I acknowledge that it's something that doesn't give you joy, and this is why it's on your plate, right? And so if you think about to the great leaders that and I'm curious, even in the comments, I would love to know if this is also your perspective or not on when you think back on that was a great leader. Did you feel like they saw you?
Powerful.
Yeah. There's something to think a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, Marcel, you joined at a great time. We're just talking about how low emotional intelligence may show up. So,
yes.
I think another one is not understanding and managing your own emotions. And I think there's a really fine line between being authentic and showing emotion, but yet understanding how to show that emotion in a mature way to who you're working with.
Yeah.
So, for example, right, if you're in food safety for a hot minute, it can be frustrating. I remember being in a spot where I was really, really frustrated, and I couldn't even connect. I just did that. I'm fine. I couldn't even understand my own emotion, which is part of the self-awareness we talked about last week.
Yeah.
But what I wasn't also very good at noticing is how, by trying to push that emotion down, others sense that.
Yeah.
And understanding where I'm at would have helped me better connect and display probably the emotions in the right, I don't want to say in the right way, because there's not always a right way, but
in the most effective way.
I think effective, because what it didn't allow me, I didn't take time to actually be like, people thought it was because of them. I'm like, well, no,
right?
It has nothing to do with you. It's just me. Yes. I'm frustrated and I don't know what to do.
Yes.
And so that's part of that, how to handle those emotions in a mature way. Because I didn't want my team to feel that. I didn't want people around me to feel like I was just they were the problem. It was me not connecting.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. If people are saying to you, I'm man, I thought you were mad at me, or I thought you were annoyed at me, or, I thought something, fill in the blank, at me, and that is not true. That's because you're having a low emotional intelligent moment, right? That's showing up in the sense of whatever was going on with you, you didn't display it in the most effective way for your team to not feel that.
Right, to be able to connect with it, neither maybe acknowledge it, wow, I'm having a day where it's I'm a little frustrated, but it's not with you. It's
Right.
something else, and you may pick that up.
Right, exactly. And I've had those moments with my team where it's like, guys, I'm frustrated today because this is happening. And everyone's like, yeah, that's really frustrating. Like, it is.
Yep, but
it's
we're
like,
gonna get past it.
Exactly. Now let's talk about what we're talking about here,
Yes.
right? Because it just acknowledges that, okay, Tia is a little off, right? Like they recognize something is off. And sometimes they're like, man, is it me? Did I do something? Did I not fill something out? Like whatever it is. But it's like if you address it and able to recognize that and manage, again, really managing your own emotions, you're able to say, hey guys, like this is how I'm feeling right now. How I just want to acknowledge it. It has nothing to do with you or anything like that. I just want to acknowledge it that I'm a little off because things are happening behind the scenes. And then moving on from that. And I think people appreciate that.
Well, they do, but it also creates that space where when we're able to recognize and share that, we're also giving permission to other people to say, I also can share when I'm, feeling this or feeling that, so that it's creating that safe space.
Exactly.
Right? Safe space.
Right. And I think it goes even to what Sarah's saying, you're giving your perspective on really your leader really understanding who you are. And like you said, it goes back to asking those simple questions on like about themselves, like how are you feeling? And even learning something personal about them, right? Sometimes when you start that, people might not want to share.
Right. But it's weird. It can be weird.
It can be weird. Like, you really want me to know what's going on. And sometimes people will stay that way, right? But there's also a large group of people that you need to create that safe space with. And that's around your own emotions. If you share those things, people are more likely to open up to you. And that's really a conversation around emotional intelligence.
It is, which really goes into, a lot of times we're asked like, well, why are these things here? Like, why is it so hard for us to share these different, like to bring the emotions to work?
Yeah.
And, I think there's so many different, once again, there's so many layers in this. If we even start back, and I'm going to use an example because, I've got, if you know me, I've got 13-year-old twins. And what I remember is even when they were young, and maybe showing some emotion that like didn't seem appropriate to the adult, right? Because it has to make sense to me as the adult, as the parent. And I would be like, stop crying. Like, that's not something to be mad about.
Yeah.
So at an early age, we're often taught by our community, our society, our family, like what's appropriate to show.
Right. Yeah.
And because it's hard because we haven't had to work and deal with it, sometimes it's hard to handle what does that mean and lean into it.
Exactly.
So it stems, I think, from back, there's so many layers, but that's one that makes it challenging to bring that forth.
Absolutely. Like we were just even talking about, because we're in person and we're sharing personal things, right? We were even talking about like just going through the school system and really in school, you're learning to conform.
Yes.
You're learning to conform on emotions, on how you're supposed to act in public, right? What emotions to
what's
show,
okay,
what's okay to share, share with others and show, and which ones you have to bury deep inside, right? We're taught those things from an early on. And so when we go into corporate America, and especially the shift into emotional intelligence, like you said, it is a buzzword. And it's been talked about more over the last decade or so. But it's like that shift is hard for people because we literally tell people for the first 20 years of their life that it's not okay to show those emotions. It's not okay at a job to show that you're frustrated or that you're angry or that you're sad or even overly excited.
Yes,
right?
Like to cheer and like be really happy for something you accomplished. Like tame that down.
Exactly.
Others might feel bad.
Right. Exactly. But in reality, that hurts us. That holds us back. And it really falls into that it's teaching us to have low emotional intelligence or not, maybe to not prioritize it, to grow it.
Yeah. And, and those are the things that then kind of seep into like systemically our organizations, because for a long time, even when I first started, it was always business is business, personal is personal. Like never the two shall pass.
Right.
And that comes with emotions as well. Like if you had something going on at home, you don't bring that to work and it should not affect what you're doing.
Right.
How tough is that?
Yeah.
Like we're whole people. Why would we not embrace bringing our whole selves to work, which is really why this emotional intelligence is so, like, how else are we going to connect with people if we don't allow them to bring themselves to work?
Right,
And
exactly.
recognize that.
And recognize it, exactly. This reminds me of, if you guys have Apple TV, Severance. I don't know, have you watched Severance
No,
yet?
you ask me all the time, and I'm like, I haven't watched it yet.
Severance is honestly one
I'm
of
going
the
to
best
take a note
shows.
on that.
Right. Severance
Again.
is one of the best shows out there. And a lot of people talk about like what is it really trying to say about work and work-life balance and bringing yourself to work. So if you haven't seen it, it's really around like you have a different self at work. Like they basically mess with your brain that when you're at work, like that you're at work, you can't remember your life outside of work. And when you're outside of work, you don't know what you do at work. Like you can't remember. And so it's a whole idea around like work-life balance separation. And it's a whole thing around like bringing your full self to work. And if you watch Severance, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but it's around, they try to stop people from having emotional connections, right? Because once you start having those emotional connections, you start making decisions in a different way. And in reality, they just want you to do the work. And so that's what we have to think about in our work, is that we're going to be robots and we're going to make decisions according to a process. And it's like, nope, I don't care what you think about it. I don't care if you're having a bad day. I don't care if, you're having a terrible life outside of work because something happened and you got to deal with that. Your car broke down and maybe you were late today because your car broke down, or you have to figure out a different way to get to work. And maybe you made it on time, but you had to have someone come get you and take the kids. Like all of that impacts what happens at work. And if we don't have the empathy around it, if we don't know to ask those questions that Sarah was talking about, right, and getting to know people, then we leave that part of self out. And it's almost like it's going to affect work, but we ignore it.
Right.
As if it's not going to.
Yeah, we say, just push that down.
Just push it down. And
that doesn't work.
It hurts us.
It does.
It hurts us more than it helps us to not be able to tap into this EQ.
Yeah. And Marcel, I love what you have shared in the comments. And one of the things we often talk about is food safety policies don't mean food safety culture, because that once again is scrubbing out the emotional intelligence that we need to be able to build teams. We need to engage with people. We need to get to know people as humans, right? That's culture. That's community. Like human to human interaction and sharing in this emotional journey we get to have.
Right. 100%. And it's funny because we're in person and we've been talking a lot about Enneagrams and around this whole thing on emotional intelligence. And the number that I got was 8, and it's a challenger. And so I've been thinking about that over the last couple of weeks on what that means to me. And I think it even goes back to a little bit of what Marcel's saying, is that if you just look at a policy, right, and that's the only thing you're following, and it's like, well, people need to follow the policy. They need to get behind the handbook. But if it's causing some type of problem, a barrier, it's hard for people to follow, whatever happens to be, then maybe your policy need to shift a little bit. And I think that's the culture piece of food safety and culture. Culture is the people piece. And so if your policies, and I think food safety people, we had to learn this over the years, is that there's more than one right way of doing things. And as long as we are minimizing risk, right, and ensuring that our food is safe for consumption, then we have room to do things in a different way that fits the people that we're working with. And, I think that's something that I even had to learn, because I my background, I started that had amazing processes. And so when I went to a company that did not have as much money, right, did not have as many resources, I'm one of the few or only, I have to think about, okay, that procedure, that process doesn't work because there's not 10 of us, right? There's one, there's me. And then so how are we going to do it? Because we still have to have safe food, period. Right.
Yeah. Shifting some of the things that we hold on to, that we tend to hold on to, because we know that part of minimizing risk is how do we have consistency, which often is translated into some control.
Right.
So how do we also build in I don't know if it's flexibility, but the ability to, and the ability to like bring the human side back
Right.
in.
Exactly.
Because we're all, I always say we are thinking human beings, and we all
Mhm.
need to be able to be right fully present in when we're at work. Like
Right.
reap that. That is the biggest asset.
Right, exactly. And it's important. It's important, you know?
It is.
Yeah. So that's how it shows up from a low EQ standpoint.
Yeah, and kind of
right?
why it shows up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but there's things to consider around EQ because at least when I hear emotional intelligence, I think, okay, yep, I need to recognize emotions. I need to like notice what others are doing. But what are some of the other parts that will help me build better EQ?
Right.
So,
Right, exactly. So, the first factor is how self-aware are you? Like we talked about this last week on Real Talk. So if you haven't seen it, please check out our YouTube channel because it's posted there. But we talk a little bit about building that self-awareness. And that's really the first step, is to take a look at yourself and how am I in line with my emotions? Can I name them?
yes,
right?
can I name them? Because oftentimes we've been trained to be like, well, I'm angry
Right.
or I'm happy, but there's so many different levels underneath that.
Right,
And
yeah.
so to be able to say, no, I'm actually frustrated, or I'm feeling challenged, or I'm feeling anxious, or
Yeah.
I'm just feeling a little bit low energy. Like those things, those are all the layers that we need to recognize so that we have more emotional intelligence.
Right, exactly. And we can then recognize those in the future. And really, maybe this is even going to our second factor around like, do we just react, right? Or do we pause? And once you're able to recognize, oh man, I'm frustrated, and you pause and you think about that and think about how you react when you are frustrated. Like, how do you just, oh man, my tendency is to do this. But if I pause and say, well, how do I really want to show up as myself, as a leader, as in this situation, right? Because, I told the story last week where, sometimes I want to show that I'm frustrated, right? Because that's what I want that group to understand. So we can avoid that frustration in the future. And the reason why I wanted to share it is because the team was also frustrated. So it allowed me to say, like, I'm frustrated, so are you. We're all frustrated. How do we eliminate this so that none of us are frustrated? So I wanted to show that. In other situations, I don't want to show it because that itself is going to be a barrier and a roadblock to move forward. But I have to first become self-aware that is an emotion that's happening, and I need to pause to understand why and to really make the decision on how I'm going to show up.
Yeah, and I think that's so powerful because, I'm going to use anger as an example, right? Like if that's one of the emotions that we've been allowed to kind of share in the past, like we have probably a default reaction. But when we shift that and we do say like, wow, now I'm frustrated. It's not just anger, it's I'm frustrated.
Right.
And even if you can get to the next layer, like I'm frustrated, but it's because I feel like what we do doesn't matter, or that someone's not valuing it. Our reaction changes.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. The way that we're going to respond to, I don't feel like I'm feeling valued right now is different than I'm feeling angry.
Yes.
And so that's part of that maturity in emotional intelligence as well, to be able to navigate through and understand what that is so that you can respond in the way that best helps you move forward with that emotion or that state.
Right, exactly.
And I know that was a long way around that. So thanks for sticking with me.
But it's true. And you can also look at it from the opposite end, from like, oh, I'm really excited about something. Yes. But for some reason, the rest of the group is not. Right. So I'm self-aware that I'm excited. But even just to pause and say, well, why does this excite me, but not other people? Right. And I mentioned that I was an 8 in an Enneagram, and 8 is a challenger. So I like being in situations that's challenging me and that I can challenge others, right? So it's typically in these areas of, I guess that's why I like problem solving as well, right? But I'm like, ooh, problem solving, So it's like, that's why I like being in those situations so that it's comfortable to me. But not everyone likes that. True. Right. So like if there's a challenge or something that needs to be a hurdle and I'm just like, yes, yay. And it's like overexcitement. Everyone else is like,
and I would be like, no. Can I hide here? for a bit?
Exactly. But if everyone in the room is like that, or maybe even the culture doesn't like those type of challenges, people would look at me like, man, you're really not self-aware. You're not reading the room. You're not reading the room right now. And therefore, I have a low emotional intelligence, even though the emotion is positive.
Oh, and it's all real. Like,
it's all real,
never
yeah.
discredit the emotion you're feeling,
Mhm.
but pausing to be able to demonstrate it in a way that's going to serve you,
Right.
I think is the part that's powerful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's a way of looking at it and say, you know what, guys, this excites me because of this. This gives us an opportunity to solve a problem that we've had for 20 years. Or this gives us an opportunity to remove a barrier that is frustrating everyone, right? Whatever it happens to be, to be able to understand why you're having that excitement, and that will help you be able to communicate it to other people and get other people on board, right? Like if you're the only one excited, that's not really fun to be the only one that's like woo, and everyone else is like, we hate it here, you know. But if you can get people to come along with you, and you know, this kind of falls into like the influence and those type of things that really emotional intelligence is all a part of.
Yes.
You know, first understanding yourself with self-awareness, and the next second factor around how you're reacting, and do you pause before you react, is so important.
Yeah, and those are the things that we look for in great leaders, because we want to feel that they are sharing their authentic self, and they're helping guide like what that can look like in our organizations and for our teams, and how we are building the culture and community around us.
Right. I would be curious, you know, from you guys, even thinking about these emotions and being authentic, when you think back to great leaders, right? Can you remember times that they're angry, right? Or really they're frustrated, or they're anxious, or maybe they're super excited, but everyone's not. Or they feel like someone's challenging them that shouldn't be. Whatever it happens to be, think back to that time that they felt that way, and were they able to pause and then react? Like, it's almost like, did you pick up that, man, I know this person is very frustrated, but they handled that group with so much care, or they were able to still get their message across. And it shows up as like, man, I could not do that. I could not be that frustrated and get up on stage and have this conversation, but they did an awesome job. You know, it's like those moments that we feel like that, like, wow, see, that's why I enjoy that leader, is because if I felt that defeated, I could not get up and talk. You know, we've said that about leaders and people, right, that we admire and that inspire us to be better. But it's because they have learned to manage that emotion,
to understand it, to know how to display it, to know how to help it honor and serve them.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yep. Which kind of goes into the next one, which is when we're cultivating emotional intelligence. One is about, do we lead with empathy? Once again, empathy is another, I'm going to say, buzzword that we've been hearing a lot. And how do we interpret that, and how does it help us in emotional intelligence is really the question.
Yeah. You know, it's something like, when you think about leading with empathy, it's again steps away from policies, procedures, you know, the technical side of it, and really just listening to people and understanding what they have going on and how they're feeling about a situation, and then doing something about it as a leader.
Well, or letting them be with it too, right? Because I think it goes back to that acknowledge and letting people, you know, we want to know as leaders so that we can help with that connection.
Right.
So how do we make sure we're creating space so that we can have empathy,
right?
So we can be like, wow, you are having a tough day, or I didn't realize that was so frustrating. Like, share what that's like, and what do you want to do with that? Right,
exactly. And I think that's a really good point around like doing something about it. It doesn't actually mean,
you probably saw my look where I'm like, do something about it.
Right.
I mean, yes, that's our wanting to help with it, right? And that's the help part.
Right. And it doesn't mean that you are doing action in that sense. It's doing something about it, is asking those questions.
It is.
And helping them feel safe
Yeah, that it's okay to feel this.
That it's okay to feel this. And, I hear you. I hear you.
Yes.
I see you. That is doing something about, not necessarily like I'm going to take this from you, right?
Yes.
Like I think a lot of people I want
They
to take
do.
this from you. I want you to not feel that way.
Oh gosh, that's a whole nother show.
Mhm.
Because right when we do that, what we're telling the other person is, I'm not sure you can handle that emotion or
Right.
situation. So let me come in and swoop it up.
Exactly.
Instead, how do we sit with that to say,
Mhm.
now what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, this is something that we talk about in Catalyst all the time,
Mhm.
and how we like to really coach our clients on you asking those questions, you allowing your person to sit with it. That is you doing something.
Yes.
That is you being that leader. It's not what people typically see as doing, right? Like, I feel like I have to do an action, I have to take it away, right?
Mhm.
But being able to say, yeah, you are frustrated. How do you want to react to that?
Mhm.
Like, what is your next steps going to be?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like throwing things in the room. Okay. Well, what's another way you can react to it, right?
Yeah, what's something else?
Exactly. So, I think that's also a really good, important thing as a leader to think about, is like, how do you do something without communicating to your person that you can't handle that, so let me take it away.
Yeah.
Or,
and it's usually because we're the ones who feel discomfort with it.
right.
Like, I'm not
Right.
sure what to do when you tell me that you're angry or frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if I'm uncomfortable in that space, knowing you're feeling that. So
Right.
it's also being open to sit in that space with them, even if it's like not comfortable.
Mm-hmm. And that's really leading with empathy.
Mhm.
And if you talk to some leaders that are burnt out, and it's because they feel like everyone is dumping things on them, right? Well, it's probably because you're picking it up.
That too.
You're picking it. It's heavy because you're picking it up.
Yes.
Versus allowing that person to work with it, right?
Yes. We always talk about the heavy weight that we carry in food
Mhm.
safety and quality. And yes, a lot of times that's the risks and the parts that we know are still not done yet and
Right.
to need to be improved. But a lot of times it's also this emotional aspect that we pick up because we know people are feeling frustrated around us and we carry it.
Right.
That's a really insightful part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So think about how you
Mhm.
can lead with empathy
Mhm.
to help build that EQ.
Yeah. Yeah, and another factor to consider when it comes to EQ is the one we love. How do we solve conflicts
Mm-hmm.
effectively?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, and when you think about the conflict that might be happening on your team right now, or a conflict that has continued on forever,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes we look and it's like, okay, leaders are really just skirting around this conflict.
They do at times.
Right.
We've
like,
all seen it.
Yeah, no one's making a decision, or, let's just agree to disagree.
Yes, I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we know that not everybody is like just jumping on board with food safety at times. And so sometimes it's, well, we're just gonna keep doing what we're doing.
Right.
I don't think that's actually resolved the conflict. That's
Mhm.
just deflecting it to another day.
Exactly. Or deflecting it to another leader.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where it's like, we've all seen the people too, like where it's like, that person causes conflict on the team, so we're just going to move them to another team.
Yes, that too.
It's like that person is still going to cause conflict, and it ultimately reflects in the culture of the organization. If that person is still here with conflict in the organization, it might not be your team, it might not be quote unquote your problem, but it's influencing the culture.
Everyone around.
Yeah.
Everyone around. And I think sometimes we have, the HR 2-hour, talk about like, how do we have better communication or how do we better resolve things? And of course, those are a really good starting point.
Yeah.
But I think it's also being very, once again, mindful and intentional about when we have resolution, how do we handle that? How do we approach it? How do we make sure we move it to a place of completion versus just delay?
Right. Exactly.
Delays aren't always effective. And I think it's understanding when that is so that it doesn't, once again, it's popping back up. It's still going to be out there.
Mm-hmm. And I like that this is our fourth factor, because you really have to be self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to make sure you pause before you react. you have to lead with empathy so that you can really resolve conflict. It's like if you haven't built those relationships and you don't know yourself and you don't know how to really lean in really to empathy to what other people have going on, then it's really hard to resolve that conflict because you have no idea who you're in conflict with, right?
Or why.
Or why.
I mean, I remember earlier in my career when I just felt like, well, it's this way or no way, right? Like when it came to resolving conflict, it seemed like there was only one path. Like in food safety, we have to do it this way. I wasn't aware enough to know that really what was behind that was just like, for me, like not the uncertainty of knowing.
Right. Yes.
So there was more behind my feeling uncertain that led me to believe this was the only path. And then I wasn't reading what others were saying or leaning into that.
Right. So exactly. Yeah.
I made my own conflict.
Right. Exactly. Your own story. Right.
I guess that's normal.
Right. True. True. You know, it makes me think about like, you know, a team member of mine who everyone saw as difficult. And it's like, oh, it's hard for us to make any progress because this person is going to stop us. And I remember when I took over the team, I'm like, okay, there's some things that I want to do on the team. And I need to understand why this person is causing conflict when new things come around. And I really did those factors, right? Like, okay, what am I caring about, right? Like, why do I find that this is important to me, right? And then understanding their perspective. And so really having a conversation around, you know, hey, like we tried to roll this out. Like, what did you not like about it? Because I knew that he caused conflict there. So really understanding, leading with empathy on like, how did you feel about that situation? And as I asked these questions, I really figured out that he didn't like when something was rolled out and he wasn't a part of the solution, number one. And number two, he didn't like that a solution was being rolled out and they have tried that before. In the 30, 40 years he's been there, right? And these are all new people,
There's
right?
Always more to the story. There's always more to the story.
Always more. Yeah. And so then I realized, okay, so if I'm going to roll out something new, I need to have a conversation with him to talk about like, hey, what do you think about it? Is there something you add or take away? And just asking the question, has this been done before? Cleared up a lot.
And easy.
Yeah.
And I think it goes to Sarah, what you were talking about. Like the reason we are where we're at, and the reason we do what we do is because we had teams that helped us understand places where we were good at things and also places where we needed improvement. And so, you know, I think as leaders, that's part of how do we foster that environment so that how do we serve our team members?
Right.
And so they do help make us the leaders that we become when we are able to lean into this emotional intelligence.
Exactly. Because you have to be open. You have to be open for that feedback. You have to be open to take it and for people to even tell you these things, right? Where
to sense it, to show up, to be human. So
exactly. Because if that person had never told me like, well, this is basically how to crack my code so I don't stand in your way, right? If he didn't feel comfortable doing that and he was like, well, I just don't like it. Or I don't want to move forward, or whatever. Or maybe he's like, well, I don't challenge things. No, you know, or whatever it happens to be. Right. But he was open and honest, but I had done those things. I had built a relationship with him and he knew who I was as a person. And he was going to find out what kind of person I am as a leader. Right. Because I was new to that leadership role. And so I had done my homework in the background, and that's just really important to lean into that part of EQ, because again, that will help you become a better leader. But then also as you get promoted in the organization or move up in that same organization or other organizations, right? That becomes more and more useful, because the higher you're up, the less, you know, physical doing you are responsible for. You're really starting to become responsible for strategy and inspiring an organization, right, to move into a different direction. Right.
Well, and I don't remember the stat, but it was, you know, when the thing that differentiates people with like equivalent skills and technical knowledge is emotional intelligence.
Yes.
I forgot what it was, 90% of something. I'll find it and I can post it.
Yes.
But it was pretty compelling to say no matter what you bring, if you bring all the best skills and knowledge and data to the table, that's great, but not going to get you to where you need to be.
No, it's not.
So I know I want to be mindful. We have 10 minutes left.
Yes.
So let's quickly talk about how to build EQ.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we would recommend is to practice, being self-aware and pausing and naming the emotions that you're having. Practice leaning in with empathy. The first time that you talk to someone, you might not ask all the right questions, right? You might not get all the right information that you needed. But once you practice, you really start to figure out, like, this is how I connect with people. This is how I can build meaningful relationships. The first conflict you try to resolve, it might not turn out well, right? But that's a learning opportunity, and continue to practice.
Yeah. And, I think it also goes back to asking yourself, like, what do I notice? What did I notice? What did I miss?
Yeah.
Because those are the things that help you say, oh, you know what? I did notice this, but I didn't recognize it at the time, or I didn't act on it at the time. And so you'll see where, as you do that, you're going to start noticing more things that will lead then to the next thing and to the next thing.
Right, exactly. I always say too, like, have a peer mentor when you're practicing. Like, sometimes it's like, well, I feel frustrated about this, but I don't want the team to know that I'm super frustrated about it, because I want to motivate them to move forward. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to talk with the group. You're going to be in there. Can you let me know if
how it comes across?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe don't even tell them and say, hey, I want to know what did you pick up from the conversation? How did you feel like I was feeling? So then you could say, man, if that person's like, well, I felt like you were really excited about it. And it's like, that's the emotion I wanted to give, right? Or, I felt like you were really excited about it. And it's like, I'm not really excited about it. And I didn't really want to tell people I was excited about it because I wanted to fix these things before moving on. Then you know that you really didn't do a great job of displaying the emotion that you are feeling, right?
Yeah. And you can do the same thing with, like, one-on-ones, right? Yeah. Asking people, like, how did we connect? How do you feel we connected today?
Yeah.
We all have a sense of that. And so I think, once again, leaning into these new questions and the noticing is so important.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, all of these parts. So whether it's you're looking for a promotion, and whether you're looking just to build where you're at, whether you're looking for whatever's next, EQ is going to be a really critical part of helping you move into that space.
Right. Exactly. It's something that, remember, the IQ, the technical excellence, that is useful, right? It's useful.
Very useful.
And don't lose that, right? Nope. Continue working towards that. But you need to also continue to partner that EQ along with you, because that's really the thing that's going to get you to the next level.
It is. It's the differentiator, because there's a lot of us have HACCP, and a lot of us have PCQI, and a lot of us have all these different certifications, which is awesome and important. But when we also talk about this influencing and culture that we really are looking at, how do we shift? EQ is what will get us there.
Absolutely.
Yep. And I know Tia was laughing because I'm like, I'm going to geek out a little. If you can see this, we have an entire program, 4 different levels, on how to help leaders build EQ and influence skills, and how to be more confident and have clarity, and really be an advocate for you, for your team, for food safety. And so if you want a copy of this, go on out to our website, foodsafetykatalyst.com. There's going to be 3 in the middle, about 3 pictures. Pick technical expert. And when you click in there, you'll see a spot where you can download your own PDF that talks about what are the different aspects that we cover in each program that build leaders to be able to move and improve EQ, influence, clarity, expectations, like being strategic in how your function's working, integrating into your business so that you're really a partner versus just a function. All of that is in here, because the way we approach that in food safety and quality and technical roles, it's different.
Yes.
We are not operations. We are not purchasing. We have a different skill set, and the way we interact within the organization is different.
Right. And this is critical for us to move food safety culture forward.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it, right? Food safety culture or
Community, whatever.
Absolutely. You know, like we need these type of leaders that have a high EQ, that can lead with empathy, that can do all the things that you just mentioned. That's a part of our program: influence, being strategic, integrating to the business. All of that are really requirements to having a world-class food safety program.
Yeah, it's not the
Culture.
It's not the marketing campaign, and it's not the like splashed all over your like internal, internet and all that stuff. It's about how are we having a conversation today that supports you being your whole self here at work, and that we feel aligned on our purpose.
Right, exactly. In that people are executing it, right? Doing the right thing and prioritizing and valuing food safety. It's an uphill battle for us, right? Like it really is. It's honestly an uphill battle for people in food safety and quality to capture this concept around food safety culture and to help then integrate it into our business. You know, some of us are just trying to get people to swab when they need a swab, or hold the product, right? When they need to hold it the right way, right?
And I would even say, like, are the KPIs on getting the right swabs, is that helping move the food safety culture you want? I don't think so.
Right.
But if we start having different conversations with the people doing the swabbing and why it's important and understanding their perspective,
right,
that is what helps move that KPI forward. And then we see, but it's the conversation.
It's the conversation.
It's the connecting. It's the including. It's the engagement.
It's the culture.
Yeah. It's recognizing we're people and we all have value to add.
Exactly. So we're gonna share our email as well.
Oh, yeah.
Reach out to us with any questions that you have, or if you're just interested around EQ. And we're always excited just to hear from you and to hear what you have going on and how you're building your EQ and how we can help you.
Absolutely. So we are so grateful that you joined us, or that if you're catching this on the replay, thank you.
Yes.
We enjoy being here, and we enjoy having you part of this community with us.
Absolutely. Next week we have Neil Bogart of Ecolab here, and he has incredible stories. He's got so many things that he has seen and done, and so it's a real treat to have him on the show with us. So you won't want to miss it. Yes, we're excited to have him on the show, and we will see you all next week.
Absolutely. So make it a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.